Johnny Somali is up for his trial tomorrow on April 15th, and this is the sentencing date. So today we're going to track his history of failure and how no matter what happens tomorrow, he may end up failing hard and being punished even harder. Of course, it's a legal mindset where we teach you to be your own judge. I'm Andrew Esquire, American attorney, and this is a Fast Facts video, the quick and dirty version of the latest in legal news. So we're looking back at this history that's been going on for now almost 2 years involving the criminal trial and the process with Johnny Somali, and how his entire process and the way he's gone about this trial and how this trial has proceeded has been a complete fail for Johnny Somali. Now, of course, Ramsey Khalid Ismael's sentencing is tomorrow morning, April 15th in Korea. That'll be the evening for those in the United States. And we can see this history on how he's completely failed over the course of his trial and continued to dig himself deeper by failing to show genuine remorse, by failing to plead guilty when he could have pled guilty much earlier, by failing to actually compensate the victims. All of these things have dug himself deeper and deeper and deeper. And today we're going to get into some extra facts, which I haven't talked about before, on how even in the best case scenario for RKI, even if he gets the lightest possible sentence, there are options for the prosecution to seek harsher punishment. So let's start with this history so we all are on the same page of where this started. This started back in November 11th of 2024, and that's when he was first indicted for the 7-Eleven ramen prank, which is the first criminal charge for business obstruction.
Sorry, I'm black.
Now, this is very important because this particular district takes crimes very, very seriously. And by getting this first one on the map, by getting the first charge in, they were able to place a travel ban on Johnny Somali and keep him from leaving. That was critical to this case, as most streamers that are nuisance streamers get away with crimes because they're able to leave the country. And this is the important thing that stopped him in Korea versus other streamers. Of course, although Johnny Somali likes to say it's just about the ramen and, that's all, no, there was much, much more. Then he was indicted on December 4th for dead fish harassment. And this is not just for carrying a dead fish, as he likes to portray it, but actually going up, harassing people, getting in their face with it, and being extremely, extremely annoying to all of those folks as they're trying to go about their day. That was the second criminal charge on December 4th. Then we had a third charge pile on in February 5th of 2025, where he was indicted for subway music and harassment, which is his third criminal charge. And at this point, we already knew the case was going to be unprecedented because having a single criminal charge merged in is super rare in Korea. But when we saw two get merged in for a total of 3 criminal charges, we knew at that point this was going to be a wild case. And even further, all of these charges that were merged in were right before his trial date. So it seemed like the Korean system was just needling him at every single turn with an additional charge right before his next trial date. And we saw this pattern continue on February 26th of 2025, where he was indicted for his bus harassment, which was the 4th criminal charge. Now, once again, Johnny Somali likes to talk just about, oh, it's the dead fish and the ramen, but you're seeing these things piled on and on and on. And these are things that obstructed business. They stopped the normal operations of the bus, of the subway. These are serious penalties in Korea, and honestly, he should have known from the get-go that he was not going to get out of these scenarios. Then we have his indictment on March 25th for the first very serious crime, one that came with mandatory prison sentence. There's no fine option for this crime, and that is his deepfake with Youngman. Now, I'm not going to show that particular deepfake. It's a little graphic, but it involved Hank Yu, who you see kind of down there, making out with Korean streamer Youngman half naked. That was his 5th criminal charge. Now, beyond that, April 29th, we get hit for a second deepfake with Bong Bong, which was extremely, once again, offensive to her, painting her as his girlfriend, saying that they engaged in sexual relations. Very, very horrible for her and taken very seriously by the Korean system. We also had Lotte World business obstruction. Now, this was particularly heinous because these sexual messages, these TTSs, were played in Korean in front of children.
This is a fucking problem.
를 인식시키기 위해 여기에 왔습니다.
It's a racism problem. Where I gotta go? This way? It's racism. Because I'm black. You want me to go? I go, whatever.
And Johnny Somali knowingly kept playing these things after being told by his chat they were sexual, after being, told that, hey, you should not do this in front of children. He was warned by staff to stop. They told him through Google Translate, please stop this. He refused to stop, kept playing sexual TTS, monkey noises, everything else, lying and saying it's a ringtone. He proceeded to try to run away from security while screaming and saying he was autistic and bipolar, etc., and trying to get away with things. Of course, that didn't fly, and Lotte World eventually came through, that being his 6th and 7th criminal charges. And then we had the final criminal charge come up on July 22nd of 2025 for another bus harassment charge for a total of 8 criminal charges. This is something that observers that know the Korean system, that have experienced in the Korean system, have really never seen this many charges over the course of almost a year getting piled in there. And that's not where the trial stopped, because there was more to the trial. In fact, we had a lot of delays. We had other incidences that pushed the trial back until we really got to February 27th of 2026, which was an absolute bombshell coming down, where the prosecution rejected Somali's attempted settlement with Youngman and kept the deepfake charge standing. He wanted to get that mitigated by getting a settlement with Youngman and get that charge dropped or get that charge to go away. But the prosecution said, no, it's on our hands, not your hands, to decide whether or not we remove a charge. And they had no interest in removing that charge with Johnny Somali. They also recommended 3 years in prison with labor, right? So this is something where he's going to have to go in and work. He's going to be doing some monotonous factory work, because of course they also recommended a fine of 150k won and 5 years of sex offender registration. And as a sex offender, he will not be able to be around normal Koreans. He will be isolated from them, and that's why he'll be in the monotonous factory work. Will have to be laboring for years. Now, Johnny's closing statement was particularly heinous and an absolute monstrosity when you look at it in the scope of the Korean law and Korean system. Instead of taking accountability and being sincerely remorseful, he actually blamed the victim Bong Bong and decided to criticize Korean law as part of his closing. And that was an absolute travesty in terms of legal strategy in the Korean system. Instead of saying, hey, I'm sorry, I didn't know, this is something that I feel very remorseful for. I apologize to the victims. This is something that I made right with the victims. No, he decides to blame the victims and blame Korea. And of course, this brings us up to what we have with sentencing coming up today. And that is, under the Korean sentencing guidelines, there's really 3 levels that you can think about: mitigated, default, and aggravated. So mitigated being the lowest level, being the lightest punishment, default and aggravated. Well, we've gone over those factors and we've analyzed that on my show, but in brief, Johnny has no factors that would lead to a mitigated sentence. It really doesn't make sense by any of those factors to give him that mitigated sentence. When you look at the factors in the Korean sentencing guidelines, you actually see that only a default or an aggravated sentence is really appropriate because of the multiple crimes, a lack of remorse, no compensation for the victims, and this complete spree that he knowingly, with bad motive, engaged on for profit. All of those point to a default or aggravated sentence, something that would not give him a lighter punishment. But let's hypothetically think about, okay, Johnny Somali gets the lightest punishment possible. Well, in the Korean system, it's different than America. It's more like the German system. And actually, prosecutors can appeal decisions if they judge the sentence too light. That's a big difference from the American system. The prosecution has 7 days to appeal a decision. So even if there was a light sentence, let's say the sentence was less than half of what the prosecutor recommended, so something like under 2 years or a year and a half, or for example, if they gave him a suspended sentence, they could have a high likelihood of appealing that and have 7 days to do so. So even if the judge was to go light, the prosecutor could come back and appeal that. So here's my judgment. In judgment, Johnny Somali isn't off the hook, even if the judge tomorrow grants a light under 2 year, 1.5 year sentence. So even if he gives a light sentence, he's not off the hook. Even a suspended sentence, which would be the best case scenario for Johnny, the prosecutors can appeal that when have strong motive to appeal that based on what they recommended as a proposed sentence. And if you look at the odds on appeal, the odds on appeal are much better for prosecutors in Korea. They're actually quite favorable. The other thing is we still have the child harassment charges, which are still actionable. And if prosecutors felt like, hey, he got off the hook for this, they could still have time to bring those, and they could bring those forthright. The other thing is that Johnny Somali is likely going to be stuck with offender status, which can carry over into the United States. That's something that's going to bear with him and can have criminal consequences elsewhere, particularly if he fails to register. So we'll all be paying attention to what happens tomorrow, but no matter what happens, Johnny's history has been a history of legal failure, and he continues to put himself in hot water. But I want to know what you guys think about the Somali case, and I will catch you on the next one.